Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. As many of you know, I am so conservative that I can't turn left even when I'm driving. For those who are newly joining us, that admission requires a word of warning. This is not a safe space for those who may be easily offended by having their ideas challenged. This is broadcast number 101. What am I doing here? I'm completely lost and befuddled. Oh, there we go. We have a Christian, James Walker, and an atheist, Bill Kluck, joining us to talk about something they founded and have been leading together for just over a year, the Atheist Christian Book Club. No, it's not an atheist Christian. It is an atheist and a Christian. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who, even though he has having problems with his shingles, will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast.
Yeah, contrary to popular belief, not everyone in Florida has clay tile roofs. Some of us have the shingles. And one of those people would be me. Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees have seen their shadow and we now have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors for this program include the Designer Jesus Collection. No more does your church need to be embarrassed by your Jesus. The Designer Jesus Collection, coming to a church runway near you. And two great faiths that taste great together, Reese's Jesus Buddha Cups. And if you would like this program to continue because you like it or because you want to annoy somebody with it, please go to MidwestOutreach.org, click on the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. Gifts can start at, I don't know, $54 million. Do you think that would be a good starting place for a gift?
Well, speaking of $54 million,
it's kind of a timely amount, don't you think?
I do. Let's introduce our guest first, and then we're going to talk about $54 million, which is not what we're asking to donate.
No, we're not.
No, but we wouldn't mind. I mean, if you want to do that, that would be fine. But James Walker is a good friend. He's a president of Watchman Fellowship. His personal office is in Arlington, Texas, which that gets kind of hot out there in the summer, doesn't it, James?
95 today, I think.
95. Well,
hey, it's at least that here in Florida.
Yeah, well, and that's why I don't live in either of those places, because I just do not like heat all that much. And we have his friend, Bill Kluck, who is a self-described atheist. And we're going to try to be kind to him. But it's important to me to do this particular program because I think Christians should be able to talk with, be friends with, have relationships with those who are not Christians. And the only way you can actually know what somebody believes is by getting to know them and talking to them. And that's kind of what James and Bill do. Tell me a little bit, we're not going to get into this too deeply, but just for now, a little bit about the Atheist Christian Book Club.
Well, Bill was on me to get that started and encouraging me to be a part of that. And I reluctantly went along a little over a year ago. What it is, it's a monthly gathering of atheists and Christians between 20 and 30. And we alternate books. We'll do a Christian book, an atheist book. And so we are discussing important books from both perspectives. But we're doing it respectfully, although it can get a little intense at times.
Oh, turn my mic back on.
There was this dead air, it was just dead air. What happened?
Well, because I'm busy typing. I've got the chat room going too, and I turn my... See, one of these guys, this, the way this YouTube is set up, wherever the noise comes up from, the screen moves to there. So that's the video you have. And the first time we realized this, we had Cal Beiser on, and we're doing a break, and he started typing. And so it went to him typing instead of to the commercial. So I turned my mic off. Anyway, that's the story there. Facepalm Award.
Oh, you want to do that now? Okay.
Yeah, might as well do that.
We haven't done it in a while, have we? Yes, this was, hold on a second. We used to do this every week, and it's just been, I guess so many people have been on their best behavior for so long that I haven't really had much material to work with. I didn't have any really good nominees, but this used to be a weekly thing. Maybe it'll just be an occasional thing from now on. The Golden Facepalm or the Facepalm d'Or from the Festival du Cannes de Laughter in the Festival of Canned Laughter. And that is the prestigious, well, it used to be weekly. We can still call it a weekly award, or maybe I should put WEACAL.
Yeah, I was just thinking that weekly.
The weekly award. Yes, let's do that. Recognizing accomplishments of distinction in the fine arts of slanting the facts, spinning the story, and other assorted tomfoolery. This week's Golden Facepalm definitely is in the other assorted tomfoolery category in connection with Christianity or religion in general. And in keeping with this, let me introduce you to Jesse Duplantis, a guy really, he's been flying under my radar screen for a long time, to coin a pun here. Pastor of Covenant Church, co-founder of Jesse Duplantis Ministries, host of the Jesse Duplantis TV program. Jesse's got friends, and when you have friends, you got to keep up. You get a Jones for things, and here's his friend Kenneth Copeland. Now notice what Ken has. He's got a really nice jet. I mean, this is a really cool jet. Notice how proud Kenneth Copeland is about this jet. And here's his other friend, Creflo Dollar, or as Don likes to call him, Cash Flow Dollar, getting off his really, really nice jet. Well, Jesse, believe it or not, Jesse already has 3 jets, but he needs another one. He needs a jet that he can fly nonstop to anywhere in the world. So here's Jesse showing off the jets he already has while asking for $54 million for a new Falcon 7X, my friends. Yeah, Jesse. And Jesse says, why he needs this? Because if Jesus were here today, he wouldn't be riding on a donkey. Okay, thank you, Jesse, for comparing yourself with Jesus. This week's winner of the coveted Golden Facepalm Award from the Canned Laughter Festival is Jesse Duplantis for trusting Jesus for $54 million from hardworking families and little old ladies to buy a new jet for preaching the gospel. That's this week's Golden Facepalm Award, or the Facepalm d'Or, presented with the utmost of gravity and seriousness.
Now I have to tell you guys, if that represented Christianity, I would be an atheist.
Bill will be happy to sign you up over here.
I'm sure he would.
That reminds me of a story. I was talking to some Christians, and they were saying, Kenneth Copeland's just down the road from us in Fort Worth, right, James? Mm-hmm. And they were saying how they were getting a new jet, and for his grandson. And I said, when one of the Christians said, well, what in the world would they need a jet for his grandson? He goes, well, he's got his ministry. Obviously, he needs
I'm preaching from a jet plane.
Well, and Copeland's reason for that was so he could pray, because when he flies commercial,
the demons,
all the other seats are filled with demons.
Well, no, it's just all those. What he started out saying? He started out saying people used to come up to Oral Roberts and ask him to pray for them. Can you believe that? Well, that was okay then, but now you got all these druggies and all these evil people on planes. You're in this little tin tube at 65,000 million feet or whatever, 35,000, and all the demons are just coming to get you. That's what he said. I heard him.
Yeah. So you can have a demonless plane if it's your own private jet. So
I guess.
So if as Dr. Geisler says, you need apologists because of bad Christianity sometimes.
But we're not apologizing for Jesse Duplantis.
No, we are not.
No.
So now I understand that you, Bill Kluck, have a webcast of your own.
Actually, I don't. No.
Oh, you don't?
Then we misunderstood that.
Then I misunderstood that. Okay.
Yeah, I just did a couple interviews. And one thing I'd like to point out, I did an interview with David Fitzgerald, who wrote 10 Beautiful Lies About Jesus and is a mythicist. And one thing
I want to define mythicism.
Yeah, probably would. Yeah,
believes that Jesus didn't exist. And there's basically three players in this field. It's Robert Price, who has a real PhD from Drew University.
Right.
Patrick Carrier, who has one in classics from a real university. And David Fitzgerald, who has a history degree. And I interviewed him, and I believe that Jesus certainly existed. I think there's just incredible historical evidence for his existence. And I gave him everything I could. Galatians 1:18 through 19, where Jesus goes down and meets with Peter, his closest disciple, and James, his brother. So if he had a brother, he certainly probably existed. And he goes, oh, that's not the right James. Whatever I said, he just would have none of it.
Can we get an amen here? Can we? Now you know what it's like to be a Christian apologist.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel for you guys, because you guys got your work cut out for, especially for young people. A lot of these young kids that are atheists do not believe Jesus existed. So before you get to the gospel, you've got to get Jesus in historical ground.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for empathy.
And you have to define which Jesus. Now, before we started this, I had shared that I grew up as an atheist. And I kind of gave my little story about coming to the faith, and the resurrection was for me the thing that turned the crank when I actually came to believe. Now, and in my day, I'm not sure how old you are, Bill, but in my day,
and you're
about the same age.
Yeah. Well, when I was an atheist, atheism actually meant you did not believe God existed, period. There's, and Darwinism was really the only option. As I progressed from atheism to the faith, I went from atheism to agnosticism, because I realized I couldn't be an atheist and be honest. If atheism is defined as saying God does not exist, there's no way I could prove that.
Right.
And so I thought agnosticism could work for me. Mm-hmm. And there are, as Dr. Norman Geisler points out, there's two kinds of atheists. There's an honorary atheist and an ordinary atheist. Honorary atheist would say God doesn't exist. I don't know if God exists, and you don't either, so leave me alone. And ordinary atheist would say, I don't think God exists, but I'm open to evidence. Right. And so I went transition from atheism to honorary agnosticism to ordinary agnosticism to the faith. Ultimately, we call them,
or I've heard them called fundamentalist atheists. So we have fundamentalist
atheists. That's a good term. I like that.
Around now.
Love that term.
Yeah. So where would you put yourself on that spectrum?
Well, interestingly, I'm like in the middle. We have one girl here that goes to the club named Terry, and she's like 7. I think it's like a 1 to 7 scale. And I said, don't you find any of this evidence presented, from a year in the book club compelling? Because I certainly do. The fine-tuning arguments are terribly compelling. And one of James' atheist friends, Jim Halse, just was, said, look, I find this very disturbing as an atheist.
He's the host of The Atheist Edge, and he's written a couple of books, and he's certainly a committed atheist. But he's acknowledged that there are things that come up in the club that do raise, interesting questions.
Our first book, which I recommended, was The Improbable Planet by Hugh Ross. Mm-hmm. And I used to be, read all his books and videos, Hugh Ross's Reasons to Believe. And he's an old Earth creationist that has his problems of his own, because if you try to millions of years in there, you get lots of problems.
You're putting your finger on a problem that is not just a Christian problem or a Christian versus atheist problem. It's like an everybody problem. We don't acknowledge that our own perspective, our own viewpoints have their difficult points that we need to explain that maybe not everybody is going to agree with. You see this especially when Christians argue doctrinal issues, and they tell the other side, well, your view is just absurd, and they don't stop to admit that we all have texts in the Bible as Christians that present problems for our view at one point or another. And when we present our explanation, not everybody is going to say, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And the same holds true in, atheism versus Christianity. In other words, we have accommodated our minds to certain difficulties that are inherent in our own views.
Mm-hmm. I mean, from my perspective on that, I feel like I've had, I don't know if I call it a privilege, I've had the opportunity to hear over the last year some of the best arguments against Christianity. And obviously I'm still a Christian, but I've got to acknowledge there are things that, you know, I mean, I haven't an answer to it, but I'm not totally satisfied with my answer. And sometimes I just have to say, that's a good question. Let me get back with you on that. And it helps me being one of my issues of problems that I have, I guess you could say, is all my ideas sound brilliant in church.
Right.
And so when I get to the Atheist Christian Book Club and there's, 15 atheists sitting across the table from us, I find out some of my ideas are better than others. And so I want to, this is my opportunity to get out of the echo chamber. I think it helps me be a better thinker. I hope so. And but while I feel like that we have really presented some evidence that would cause an atheist to think, I've got to also acknowledge they've asked me questions that I'm not fully satisfied with my answers at this point.
So, like,
right, but you are willing to go and look for better ways to answer.
Absolutely. I don't want to say, I believe it's true. We're supposed to have evidences for the reason of the hope that is in us.
So I have two questions. The first, and I'll ask them both at the same time, if that's okay. Number one, what kind of books do you read at an Atheist Christian Book Club? And number two, do you think this Atheist Christian Book Club could serve as a model for like a Christian jihadist book club, or maybe a cannibal and non-cannibal book club if they ever got together? Do you think that there's a potential?
Well, two of the books we're reading now, which are just perfect contrast, is How God Became Jesus. We read that first. That's the answer to Bart Ehrman's book, How Jesus Became God, which Bart says basically he was adopted. He believes in an adoptionist Christology, and that it evolved into Jesus becoming co-equal with God into the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Chalcedon. But this has just been fantastic.
And of course, in the next month we're doing the Bart's book, How Jesus Became God. So it's how Jesus became God. Is Bart Ehrman's argument that Jesus would be shocked to find out that people thought he was God. That this is something that developed over the centuries. There may have been some early talk about deity, but that was in some kind of polytheistic sense, or as a godlike angel or something. But it developed over time, maybe even over centuries, into what we have today. And of course, Craig Evans, Michael Bird, a bunch of others wrote the rebuttal book to that, which was this month's book for us, which was How God Became Jesus. So
I have both books. Yeah.
And this stuff is terribly complex, because you do have, like in Philippians 2, 5 through 11, and in Colossians, where it speaks of the fullness of God. And in Philippians, where it says, you can interpret it as Jesus didn't want to grasp onto his deity. So you can make the case for a high Christology very early in Christianity.
That's significant because Paul is writing significantly before the Gospels are written. So this is very, very early. So you don't have to look to the obvious examples from John's Gospel. You can go back to Paul, when he's talking about the resurrection with James's brother and with Peter. You're looking at maybe 6 or 8 years after the crucifixion. He's describing an event that took place then. So this is very early.
And is this your usual pattern to first do a pro-Christian book and then do an atheist
Absolutely.
book? Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting.
And so, and we sometimes, like this time is perfect, but we sometimes try to do the same theme. So, do you have a book on cosmology? For example, we started with the book that Bill was talking about, The Improbable Planet by Hugh Ross. But our follow-up book to that was the atheist book by Lawrence Krauss called A Universe from Nothing. And so he argues in that book, as a cosmologist, that that matter, energy, space, and time would not only possibly come into existence without basically from nothing, as his book title says, but almost has to. And that was interesting to me because we read the book and I had some talking points, but I just asked the atheists, what are your thoughts? And two of the atheists that were there, Sam and Jim, kind of both said the same thing. They were disappointed because they felt like that Lawrence Krauss had equivocated. Here's an atheist saying that.
Right.
I said, what do you mean he equivocated? And he said, well, he starts off about the universe out of nothing and why this is important. But about halfway through the book, he redefines nothing as very much something, dark energy, dark matter. So it's not really a universe out of nothing. It's a universe out of what we may have thought was nothing in the vacuum of space.
Right.
So,
what actually was something, right?
Yeah, he says it's quantum fluctuations. And even as atheists, we had to admit that was a pretty weak argument.
yeah, because usually, you say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So what is your extraordinary evidence to back the extraordinary claim that something came out of nothing? And he equivocates by saying, well, it wasn't really nothing, right?
Well, nothing, what we used to think was the vacuum of space that had nothing in it.
Yeah.
We now know is very full of things like dark matter, dark energy, and he also has a whole section on quantum fluctuation. And so he says that, and I don't really know how he explains this, but basically that with the dark matter and dark energy, which we thought was nothing, you could very much possibly come up with a universe. So
okay, except that you're right. You are equivocating because you didn't have a universe until you had a universe for dark matter to exist in.
Yes.
So what? So
exactly. Where did dark matter and dark energy come from? That's not nothing. That's something.
Does Krauss ever answer the question what existed before the Big Bang, or can he even answer that?
He quickly goes, like most atheists, to multiverse.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
punts to multiverse.
So we can't answer the question, but if there are other universes out there, if there perhaps even an infinite number of universes, then it solves two problems. How did this universe come to existence? Well, they do every day. Constantly universes are coming to existence. And then the other question, it deals with fine tuning. If you only get one big bang, what are the odds that it's going to bang exactly right? If the expansion rate is plus or minus a tiny fraction, you don't even get the periodic table, much less stars and planets. Right. You get hydrogen, maybe helium.
I think the argument for a multi-universe has become a lot more credible since the last election, don't you? I mean, this can't be the same universe I was in 3 years ago, 4 years. I mean, it just can't be. Well, anyways, how did you come to the decision to deal with the Christian books first? Oh,
that was my choice, because I used to be a big Hugh Ross fan, and I found his old Earth creationism problematic.
All right, you know what? Before we go too far, when you say I used to be a big Hugh Ross fan, probably those who are watching need to know that at one point you considered yourself a Christian. Oh
yeah, I was born again at 17. Pretty fundamentalist guy. I mean, I used to go to Jerry Falwell's church. I actually went to his conferences, the Young Earth Creationist conferences, and studied that thoroughly. And then when I was like 40 or so, somebody in Sunday school said Bart Ehrman's going to be at the Barnes & Noble. I went, who's that guy? So I went there, and within 30 minutes, I realized, I don't know anything about New Testament scholarship or, Christianity for that matter. And so I read every book he wrote and, learned the historical critical approach to, Christianity.
He had an awakening that Bart Ehrman loves him and has a wonderful plan.
and the thing is, when Bart Ehrman's books first came out, I was so steeped in what they call the topic of biblical introduction or higher criticism that I just started laughing when I started reading them. I just said, really, seriously, this guy. But that's another story. My major was biblical studies, so I had to devour all that stuff for my master's degree. How many people go to this study? How many people attend?
The book club?
Yes, the book club.
We had, I think, 33 last.
Wow, really?
We don't want to get a bigger venue because any bigger, and we're afraid a bunch of individual conversations will be going on. So, but we are maxed out what we can fit in our Watchman offices.
By the way, we had Tim McGrew. I'm sure you're familiar with him. Out of Western Michigan. He's a Christian apologist. He hadn't really got to the next level of Christian apologist, but the guy's brilliant. James told me he has an encyclopedic mind. You guys ought to have him on. I mean, because we love him as atheists because he's such a, you know, fun guy, and he has a great sense of humor. Like during the discussion, I said, well, you have to remember in the Gospels, you have some stuff that's historical, some quasi-historical, and some myth. And he goes, thanks for that confession of faith. But I think, you know, that's great, you know.
The two biggest groups that we've had when we go over 30 both times was when we had an actual live person in with us. So the first time was Aaron Ra, who's somewhat of a well-known, at least in this area, atheist and author of the book, Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism.
And I told James the appropriate action would be worship. I mean, this guy is a guy that has no advanced degrees. He's like a self-appointed, you know, evolutionary expert.
No, now Aaron might hear this. I'm just
well, I got to be honest. And then remember, we were at the we have this thing called the Bible and Beer Consortium, where they have a Christian and atheist or whatever, you know, do a debate, and that's real popular. But anyway, I ran to Aaron, and you know, he was onto this Jesus doesn't exist kick, and I was just like, oh, Aaron, that's, you know, crazy. And, but I invited him to our book club because he wrote a book, Foundations of Creationism.
Okay. And
in the book, he didn't even know the most basic things about Christianity. He got what, modalism confused with?
Like me, he's a former Mormon, and I think some of that stuck with him as far as his understanding of Christianity. But bottom line is, when Aaron Ra heard we were going to do his book, he lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so he asked if he could be here. And so he has a lot of fans, and you know, he's world famous on the internet. So we had a big influx of new atheists that came, and that was our biggest group. And our biggest group was when we had Tim McGrew here in person, and we were discussing Bart Ehrman, and that was, so we're going to try to do that once a quarter, try to bring the author in. And but even when we don't do that, most of the time we do a Skype interview in advance and take pre-questions. So, for example, on our book this month, How God Became Jesus, Bill, as the atheist, interviewed Craig Evans, and we did like a 40-minute interview. We break it into 3 or 4 segments, and so we discuss the book, but then we also play the interviews, and then the atheists and the Christians, for that matter, can ask questions to that author. And so we've got, for the next month, we have Michael Bird already been interviewed for that.
Okay, yeah.
One of the other co-authors.
I'd like to see that one. Are you about 50? Do you know what the percentage is?
About 50-50, maybe 60-40 Christians, but it's fair. And, you know, yeah, we certainly can defend ourselves, the atheist groups.
And we have some, they're all over the map as far as, you know, we have some of the Christians here are like college professors at Christian colleges.
Okay.
I'm thinking 4 maybe. And then we have Christians who just have a, you know, no advanced degree. They're just interested in the topic. And the atheists would swing the same way. We have one guy who's a former Wycliffe Bible translator who's now an atheist. He's, you know, very, very sharp. Jim Hall, I mentioned. He was never a Christian, but he's really, really good. He's got his own Atheist Edge podcast. Chris, former Christian.
He used to work in a Christian bookstore.
Used to work in a Christian bookstore, and also is very well read. So that's the encouragement I've seen on this is, and the odd thing about the book club, it's kind of weird because even though we're on opposites, atheist, Christian, in some strange way, it's like, even though we're on opposite sides of the issue, we all agree this is the issue. And in some ways, I have more in common with the atheists at the club than some of the people at my church who don't see a need for this kind of thing.
Just like with you guys, I mean, when we use these terms, you know, with biblical scholarship, you know what we're talking about. So that's right. Or I can talk to James for hours, and it's like we are on the same page. But if you talk to an atheist who just doesn't have a clue about scholarship, then it's just like it's not even, you know, like Aaron Ra, who really doesn't know anything about Christian scholarship. You know, it's frustrating. And another thing that gets me is these young YouTube atheists. There's this guy named Cosmic Skeptic. Who I found out he has like 93,000 views, and he's supposed to be the next Christopher Hitchens. Found out he hadn't even gone to college. He says, I'm going to have to cut back on my YouTube. in my vacations in Hawaii or whatever. I mean, these guys don't even have to work because now when I was, before I went to college, I didn't know anything. And this guy is like has the mantle of, of atheist leadership, and they are sharp guys. Him and, genetically modified skeptic who's right here in the Dallas Fort Worth area.
On R and Ra, where obviously we have our differences on. I think both of us do.
Oh,
apparently.
absolutely. Yeah.
But Aaron has done a lot of intense self-study in the area of biology and evolution. So it's not like he's written a whole book on the topic, and it's not like he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I know, but if you're going to go and talk to other atheists and Christians, because they hear this stuff too, then go get your doctorate or go through, the higher levels of education. But they won't do it because they're already, celebrities on YouTube and everybody worships the ground they walk on.
Oh, yeah, but, for me, the point is know what the other side actually believes. Don't invent things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, one thing about the club is I think both sides agree that you get further talking with people than talking about them.
Well, speaking of inventing things, we're going to take just a little short break here.
Yeah, because people do invent things, don't they? And that's why when you do this, you don't want it to be embarrassing. And we have a question for you, and that is, do you cringe when the Christians you hang out with try to introduce Jesus to your non-Christian friends? Well, you can say goodbye to the days when your church's Jesus was a source of social embarrassment. Now, even your church can keep pace with the latest fashion-forward trends in spirituality. Introducing the Designer Jesus Collection. These amazing new Jesus styles are hitting church runways and the most exclusive Jesus fashion shows at churches near you. You don't want to miss Yoga Jesus, Hipster Jesus, Buddha Jesus, Socialist Jesus, Mormon Jesus, and of course, Muslim Jesus. At Designer Jesus Collection fashion shows, you will find a Jesus you'll be proud to introduce to your most sophisticated, cutting-edge friends and acquaintances. Just remember that the attendance requirements include cost of admission, your eternal soul, required attire, semi-formal, and all proceeds benefit His Royal Majesty, the King of the Kingdom of Darkness. Yes, the Designer Jesus Collection, London, Paris, Rome, New York, Salt Lake City, and coming to a church runway near you. So this is a really timely topic here.
We're going to make a Jesus for atheists, but it just is blank. So
right, it would be blank. Yeah,
good point.
And there's I forget. I had another Jesus recently, but I forgot. Oh, anyways, just this week there was a when you were talking about how sometimes there seems to be this shared resonance between atheists and Christians. I guess that's the way I describe what you were saying. There was a story just this week how atheists can be just as or even more religious than Christians. And I don't know.
Fundamentalist atheist. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, they're focusing on this Beyonce mass, and I have no clue. I haven't seen it. I don't know what it's about. But as soon as one of my friends started tweeting about this, and I said, well, man, all you got to do is look at the introduction to Carl Sagan's Cosmos. And there's a little, I don't know, a couple minute clip of that. It's the very beginning, and you have this swirling Vangelis music, and there's Carl Sagan standing. I think it's on a cliff over in Dover or someplace. I don't know, this vast, amazing panoramic scene, and he goes, the cosmos is all that ever is, ever was, and ever will be. There's a stirring in the soul.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we've been criticized for having our own, the demon haunted world. I mean, we have our own books, our own, and the rallies, the Reason Rally. I mean, that has a lot of religious fervor.
Right. Well, so Carl Sagan made a religion out of the cosmos, which, I mean, yes, as Christians, we're amazed too. We stand back and we just go, wow. This is awesome. Every time we see a new picture from Hubble or anything like that, it is amazing. But from the Christian perspective, that's the creation. It speaks of how great the Creator was. To the atheist, that is his Creator.
Well, I mean, one of the things that impresses, you've heard there's as many suns as there are grains of sand in all the beaches of the world, which just is just blows your mind. I mean, it
Right.
just, and so I go to my atheist book club thing over in North Dallas, and I said, well, what do you, I mean, that is pretty amazing that you have suns, some bigger than our suns, 20 times bigger, you know, just too not numerous to count, but somehow they figured it out. And I go, what do you think? He goes, oh, it's just matter. And I asked James, and he goes, it's the majesty of God. So it's just, you have two different ways of obviously looking at the same evidence.
Yeah, it's just matter on the one hand, but on the other hand, have you ever met an atheist who doesn't say, wow? I mean, when they look at it, when they see it, when they start to try to,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like the Hubble telescope, when they did that, they pointed it in just a dime-sized view of, and they had all these galaxies. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
So here's the interesting thing about Sagan's opening, and maybe you guys already realize this, but when he says the cosmos is all there is, all there was, and all there ever will be, what is he actually saying?
Matter
There is no God.
Well,
right?
actually, he's saying matter is God. I mean, that's.
But if he opened his program saying there is no God, all there is cosmos, nobody would watch it.
Right. Yeah.
Right, but he does, and Ron's right. He makes the cosmos God. In fact, when he writes, if you look at his books, every time he comes to cosmos, he spells it always with a capital C.
And when you say, I mean, how can you not hear a Christian creed? All that is, all that was, all that will be, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty, right? I mean, it's right there in the book of Revelation, you know.
Right. But it's interesting too. This come up on this majesty of the universe and the size of it and stuff. That it's a lot of the atheists just come up in our meeting a couple of times. It's just like, doesn't the size of the universe bother you as a Christian? In what way? I mean, why? And so it's so big, so much wasted space or something. And I said, what would be for the atheist, if there's a God, what size should the universe be? Is it too
right.
small? Help me understand this. If you are an infinite God, what way do you display that in creation, except the kind of a universe that we're seeing?
And see, as atheists, we do have problems. And one of the huge problems is the origin of life. There just doesn't seem any way
abiogenesis.
To get life started from ground. Go ahead.
So did you see Ben Stein's Expelled?
Oh yeah.
And so I mean, most people just I mean, Roger Ebert, the film critic, that's not even worth my time. No. I mean, but you're saying maybe he's presenting.
It's just so problematic, the origin of life, because you have to have the DNA to make the proteins, and DNA is a protein. You have to have a lipid around the cell. How did that come? You have to, one of the huge problems is you've got to make these amino acids. And first of all, they have to be all left-handed, or the 20 amino acids, which are the building blocks for protein, they have this homochirality problem where they can't have an equal mixture of left and right, or even some right. It has to be all left-handed. And, it just is a huge problem to get this, life off the ground. So,
but in your view, it's not insurmountable. You're assuming
the best atheist answer I heard is we don't know, and we don't have to know, but we might one day know. And I've been challenged with this. What happens when scientists are able to create life out of nothing in a test tube in a laboratory somewhere? I said, well, first of all, it wouldn't be out of nothing. You're going to be using matter
and intelligence.
Right. And it would require intelligence. But right now, all the intelligence in our world pooled together can't do it. Right. So if eventually intelligence can, all you've proven is that intelligence can create life. That's all you've proven.
Right. And the other thing problematic is you've got to have enzymes to get these amino acids to become proteins. Without the enzymes that speed up these things like 100 times, you're not going to get much. I was just looking at a podcast the other day by a guy named Tour, T-O-U-R, which...
Right. He's a Jewish guy. He's amazing. Jewish Christian.
I mean, how do you answer that? I mean, just the complexity. You have to have these things all go right. And he was saying when you have leftover material, that messes up your... action. And I knew a friend who it took him 6 months to go and, synthesize some sort of biological product, and then it got washed down the drain by
one
of the work to help.
What you're talking? I mean, we Christians though do have to be aware of the God of the gaps syndrome, don't we? In other words, we assume that anywhere there's a gap in our knowledge, that God, that's why we need God. But then as the gaps start to shrink, those on the opposite side say, aha, you know, we can explain that now, and therefore these other things that are gaps today will probably go away later with the expansion of our knowledge.
Yeah, my quick answer to that is every time a gap closes, we haven't eliminated God. We've just said this is how God did it.
Okay.
So the other factor is I've seen the opposite problem, naturalism of the gaps, and that is this whole thing on you know, abiogenesis, or the whole thing about a universe from nothing. Here's what I'm hearing is we don't know the answer, but we're absolutely certain it's not God. Well,
okay.
I mean, that's naturalism of the gaps.
It is. I had a thing years ago where I was asked to debate a professor on a campus on evolution versus creation, and it was set up. And then he asked if I was a young Earth creationist, and I said, "Well, I am, but that isn't really the issue, as far as I can tell. The question is, did God, or did it just happen uncaused?" So he chose not to debate me, which was fine. And so I went and I did my presentation, and then they had him come and give a presentation, and I showed up. So he was stuck in a room with a young Earth creationist, as it turns out, anyway. And I started kind of in the middle of the whole existence question when I got to ask my question. I said, let's assume that in the beginning was nothing that exploded into everything. Let's just assume that's true. Let's assume that there was a primordial soup on a globe that we'll call a planet Earth. Let's just assume that actually happened. Let's assume that in that primordial soup, 21 amino acids popped into existence for no apparent reason. It just happened, and then stuck together and said, "Oh, let's be life. Let's just assume that happened." And then we have the first beginnings of life. How do we go? Here's my question: how do we go from single cell divide and multiply reproduction,
right,
very simple, to male-female reproduction, and what are the steps between those? Because we know that male-female reproduction is a little difficult. I mean, we have infertility clinics just for that reason. I said, it seems to me you have to have a male pop into existence ready to reproduce at a point in time with everything there formed and functioning. And you have to have a female pop into existence at a point in time. But that still doesn't solve the problem, because it has to be at the same point in time. And that doesn't solve the problem because it has to be in approximately the same geographical location. In other words, you have to have a male and female come into existence at the same point in time at the same geographical location. That sounds to me more like creation than it does evolution.
Well, no, that's an excellent point. In one of the books that I've read recently, which is going to be a little technical for our club, it's The Language of God. I forgot who it was by, but
Francis Collins. We did do that.
No, oh yeah, Francis Collins. I'm sorry, The Signature of the Cell. I read that, which really showing how problematic it is. You know, everything with evolution is to get RNA off the ground, then the RNA can somehow go into DNA, and he kind of blows that out of the water in The Signature of the Cell. But we read The Language of God, which, you know, he's an evolutionist who gave us some good evidence for, like, we can't synthesize our own vitamin C anymore. And he shows us in the book, remember, the traces of evolution. So he gave a good case for evolution. But still, you're absolutely right. That's assuming, you know, you have something to work with. Natural selection has something to select with.
Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to focus on the dynamics of this group. I mean, this is a very unusual group you have, isn't it? I mean,
well, actually, they have a group in London. We were Justin Briley. I don't know if you guys listen to Premier Radio, the Christian show by Justin Briley out of London.
Okay.
He's had Bart Ehrman debate Tim McGrew and so forth, and he has really good people like Stephen Law was on there debating. I mean, just fascinating program. And he said they have skeptics in the pub, which isn't his group, but he, you know, said, so there is like 70 people that meet there at the pub.
Wow, 70.
And there's a group in Colorado, Springs up there.
Okay. So like, I guess the first question that pops into my mind, there are two, and I like them both. The last time I asked two questions, the other one was just sarcastic. But in this case, have there been any crossover conversions either way? You know, from atheism to Christianity, from Christianity to atheism.
Has there?
Okay, there haven't.
The bill is real close.
And the
but not like Jim. I mean, I mean, you got to be an idiot not to see the fine tuning, how incredible the improbabilities are. That, you know, like the expansion rate of the universe has to be just right. If it goes too fast, galaxies won't form. If it goes too slow, you get black holes. I mean, these, you know, things. And like Jim, I mean, James had an excellent point, which, you know, it has to be right the first time. You don't get a second chance. So,
I would say, no, we've not seen anybody convert.
Okay.
But, you know, maybe, you know, I've seen some things that I would say is movement.
Okay.
And sometimes it's just more respect than maybe.
That's, which is good. Yeah, that's good.
I have an idea that if you're an atheist, it's because you're immoral or because you
right.
hate God. And I do see that sometimes, but we have atheists at our club that are very open. You know, if there was sufficient evidence, they would become a Christian.
Look at Dick with he showed us a video on the complexities of the cell, and I went, Dick, have you converted or something? And he really, actually, James has given him a lot of good counseling. So
it's
like Bert Ehrman, and I don't know where he's at today, but I remember when we had him at Midwestern, he was pretty upfront and honest. That he said that he became an atheist not because of contradictions or supposed contradictions in the Bible, but because of the problem of evil.
Right.
He had a loss in his life, which
maybe we ought to do. Although it seems like every book club, no matter what the book is, at some point we come around to the problem of evil.
Oh yeah, it's a hard one.
It is a hard one, and I think, and that's one of those that you know, as James pointed out, and Ron has said so many times already. There are problems with every view, and that's one that we have to deal with. We may not like the answers that we have, but we do have to address that question.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was in another group, and I've learned more about Calvinism than I ever wanted to know. But Calvinism,
and we're like the pariahs of evangelicalism.
Well, you know, I go to Sunday school class even today. You know, I just love to hear. I just learn something every time I go.
He's more faithful to church than a lot of Christians are.
And the guys like that are the smartest, the leading edge, the really smart Sunday school teachers seem to be Calvinists, and they do have just terrific scriptural evidence for their views.
Well,
I find it compelling, the sovereignty of God. You know, you can kind of get past that problem. Maybe people think if God's sovereign and there's an ultimate, it has redemptive value. And at the end, what is it? Psalm 73, it says, David says, I looked at the rich people and I was envious and all I got is suffering. And he goes, and then I saw, but eternal perspective.
Yeah.
And he surely puts their feet on slippery ground. So he had an eternal perspective. So I see absolutely,
Ron is administrator for a Facebook group, a Calvinist Facebook
two
group.
Of them,
really? Wow.
Two of them. One is a debate one, and the other one is really just mainly for Calvinists. Visitors are welcome, but they need to behave themselves. And as an admin in both, I have to say, look, you can get away with insulting Calvinism over on the debate one, but you can't do it here.
Well, and in fact, what is your tagline on that one?
Calvinism, the group that chooses you. And I didn't make up either of these groups. I got invited in to be an admin, and
they chose you, right?
What's that? Yeah, I was chosen.
It chose you,
I was elected. I have a lot of things to say about this, but we don't have that much time.
Right.
And I'm more interested in your group, and that is, looking at the way people interact with each other online. I mean, people are mean, people are vicious, people are cruel, and they don't tolerate the internet is probably the least tolerant environment for opposing viewpoints in the universe today. But to have a group like yours requires tolerance. How do you keep the passions down? Or was that even a problem?
You know, I'm in other theology groups, and we can just be at each other's throats. But this group, probably because of James' leadership, I mean, has just been unbelievably civil and nice and respectful. And has a lot of intellectual firepower to it. I mean, you have one guy reads 50 books a year. And he's vice president of Criswell College. And he's just, and I love listening to him because I love to hear well thought out, just like the Calvinists. I love to hear they're thoughtful, they give the evidence, and
Well, I guess I'll say this, just one thing about being a Calvinist, and that is, as a Calvinist, you're always on the defensive.
Yeah.
Because your views seem so like, what? You and before I was a Calvinist, I had that.
Yeah.
How can you believe that
Right.
stuff? And so when you get gradually persuaded into it, then you're on the defensive, and you need to know how to defend it. And
Right.
and Calvinists have a huge respect not only for the Calvinism, but for the context of Calvinism. In other words, the creedal history of the church and how it came about. You know, in other words, I'm just as amazed by the Athanasian Creed, the Trinitarian debates of the 3rd and 4th centuries, you know, the stuff that you're dealing with how Jesus became God or how God became Jesus. All that stuff as a Calvinist is fascinating to me because, you know, that's the element you find yourself in at all
Right.
times.
Well, this might surprise you guys, but I'm not a Calvinist.
He's not.
Ah!
And that's interests and intrigues me as well.
That was preordained, by the way.
Pardon?
That was preordained. That it was providential that you would.
I pointed out I was predestined not to be a Calvinist. And,
Amen.
I can't fight God's will on that.
Absolutely not.
So, but back to your group again. So you are civil. You like. Does everyone read the book, or do you guys read the book and tell them what it means?
What we do on that, we really strongly encourage it. Some do, some read half of it, but I always try to pick out, or Bill does, a good 2-hour debate with one of where the author's debating the book, or a lecture that he or she did. And so we always say, if you don't have time to finish the book, if you'll watch this 90-minute lecture, if you'll watch this 2-hour debate, you'll be up enough to be able to come discuss the issues. So we give them an alternative in this, because we realize we're living in a society and culture where people just don't read.
Like for this upcoming debate, Bart Ehrman debated Michael Bird, B-Y-R-D. B-Y-R-D. Who's just got a great sense of humor. He's an Australian guy who insulted both of us very badly. He said that the Cowboys or the NFL is a bunch of pansies. I went, are you out of your mind? Yeah, and he goes, rugby's a real man's sport. You know?
Well, we don't wear pads in rugby. We break limbs. Bill, what is it about James's leadership? And James, you could also give us pointers on what you think it is that helps it work, that makes it happen with as little acrimony as possible.
Well, for one thing, James does all the work. He's the one that puts together the videos. He's the one that does all the Facebook stuff, and just does an incredible amount of work for very little in return, if nothing in return. And just sets the tone, and it's just fantastic. And we both, I have given James everything in the kitchen sink, and he just is like,
bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. And that's the thing. To me, Christians, if they'll go and look at the evidence, then their faith can be stronger.
Amen.
If nothing else, it's an inoculation. So it's like you're not hearing this for the first time, and you've had time to process it and think about it and look at the alternative options to that line of thinking and stuff. So, every month, every book club, we have new people, sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes more than that. And I think sometimes what they do is kind of, they're a fly on the wall. They're kind of watching, okay, how are you supposed to behave in this kind of thing? And then they learn, you can't dominate the conversation, and you ask questions more than you do make statements. Well,
and I'll give you a perfect example. Brady, who works for James, and Jim Hall had this debate. I went and I believe the gospel the gospel narratives on the birth of Jesus are fiction. So I was saying how Quirinius, that's
right. That's a problem. That's a problem. The Quirinius
6 AD, and Herod was dead at 4 BC, and somehow Luke has them at the same time. And then Brady just pulled a rabbit out of his hat and found an inscription that said he was military governor or something. It was
right. It's a problem I've looked into, and it doesn't completely erase the problem, but it's I don't think it's insoluble myself.
But I think that's a microcosm of this club and Jim Hall said, well, I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that.
What was the Quirinius inscription? I'm not sure I've heard that one yet.
Something on a stone. He said it was on a stone.
There were actually 2 inscriptions. One of them doesn't have the name, but
Okay.
the context seems to say it's talking about him, but the other one actually has his name on it. There's less detail, but it deals with him being a co-ruler over the region. And it was,
Right.
I looked at that, and but it was like the bottom line is after Brady, I said, you have 15 minutes or 12 minutes to do a presentation. He put a PowerPoint together at the end of it. You know, a number of the atheists said case closed. That's not no longer a problem.
Wow, that's great. I want to see that PowerPoint presentation.
Maybe
now we have as Ron gets ready for our other really short break here, we have XJW Antichrist who wants to know what is going on here. Have we ever heard of Jesus?
That's not exactly how he said it.
No, not exactly, but I'm not going to say exactly how he said it. And then he lets us know that we're pansies, which
what is this? Jesus the baby killer. What is that? What?
I couldn't say. I don't really know. But apparently he's a little dissatisfied with what we're doing.
Well, so he would be an example of how the kind of acrimony you try to keep a lid on in a group like this, because people will come and they're passionate sometimes to present their side. And so, James, do you have like 1, 2, or 3 points, bullet points? If someone wanted to start at a group like this, what would you advise them? What would be your top advice to make it work?
What I would encourage, first of all, I would encourage people to do it. You know, I think it's worth the time and effort. You will not only learn things yourself, but you will make new friends. I think it was helpful in my case that I had a year-long relationship with the atheists, just going to their meeting, their fellowship, try to go once or twice a month, so that when we launched this, I already knew them. You know, I already had 4 or 5 that were going to be there day one and were committed to it. And we knew each other. We knew what to expect. We were already friends at that point. So the new atheists that came in, the new Christians, kind of looked to us and, oh, this is how it is. And I'm guessing that's how it was.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, if you on any major city is going to have a university, the university is going to have like a free thought club or either atheist.
Okay.
Go sit down and meet with them. Have a cup of coffee.
The key word might not be atheist to look for. It might be skeptic or free thought.
Yeah, something like that. But if you find the on-campus clubs, go to meet with them. Meetup.com will sometimes have like atheist agnostic gatherings, and you go and you're upfront with them. Hey, I'm a Christian, but I'm interested and want to build some relationships, friendships, and kind of get to know them. And again, all good evangelism is built on the back of relationship. Yeah. And my DNA is sometimes I want to have the powerful argument, and I trust the power of the argument.
Right.
Today, when you don't even get to share the argument unless you build the relationship and the opportunity.
And a little attempt to inject some Calvinist theology in here. As Calvinists, we not only believe in saving grace, we believe in common grace, and common grace is a good thing. In other words, friendships with people who are not Christians are beneficial to us. You know, we even if we don't convert them now, we desperately long to see them converted.
It's a friendship that's a friendship. I'm not expecting them to become Christians at this point. I'd be thrilled if they did, but they're still my friends.
It's a good in and of itself, and a lot of Christians sadly don't even believe that.
Right, that's unfortunate. So now, quickly do our
next. You want to go to our next spot? Okay. Well, we just we like to share this little story here. So one day, Rob Bell was walking along and not watching where he was going, and he smacked right into the Dalai Lama. Bang! And the Dalai Lama said, "Hey, you got Christianity in my Buddhism," and Rob Bell said, "You got Buddhism in my Christianity." And then they decided that it's not all about the truth, but experience. And isn't taste one of the best experiences? Two great faiths that taste great together. Reese's Jesus Buddha cups. You need to get those. Those will really enhance your life. Okay, so.
Make me hungry.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's almost lunch. So our XJW lets us know that he's a misotheist, which it seems to me, Bill, you as an atheist touched on that earlier.
Oh, okay. I thought you said mythicist.
Yeah,
earlier.
mythicist, right? I think I think that's what he's trying to write here. And so what would your response to be as an atheist to another atheist who says he's a mythicist?
Well, there's several lines of evidence and several criteria for putting Jesus in history. One is the criteria of embarrassment, where Jesus, and John Dominic Crossan even said, if there's anything historical, it's that Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River by John. And the thing is, John should be, why is he baptizing Jesus? Jesus should be baptizing John, because it's a baptism for the forgiveness of sins. So by that, it's an embarrassment to the Christians, but it's still in there. So that really, and the same with the crucifixion, neither the Jews nor the Gentiles or the Romans were expecting a crucified Messiah. It was an ignominious death that just wouldn't resonate with anybody. You also have the criteria of dissimilarity, that if it sounds like a Christian church saying it, then it doesn't go back to Jesus. But there are some things that Jesus says that we can actually say are authentic teachings of Jesus. And of course, one of the big ones, multiple attestation. When you have these different writers of the gospel, they're crammed into our New Testament. When you have different writers, different times throughout the Mediterranean saying the same thing, then that kind of shows you that you might have some common history. Another thing which I think is a great evidence is Judas. We have two different traditions. In Matthew, you have him jumping off a cliff. In Acts, he hangs himself. But there's things in common, like the field of blood and the 30 pieces of silver.
Yeah, of course, we've had talk about this. I believe all that can be completely harmonized, but even if you don't think it's harmonized to you, harmonizable to you, it's evidence for
absolutely. I love different. I think there was a common tradition, and it just had two different, views.
Okay.
Just like the.
Can I comment on the Judas thing here? Because this is, I deal with Jehovah's Witnesses a lot, and they like to point to the quote torture stake. And so when it says Jesus went out and hung himself, and his bowels gushed out. And you point out that he jumped off something. At the time, they had the torture stake, which was used. It was an impaling stake. They would throw people on it. So when Judas hung himself, he didn't take a rope and hang himself off a bridge. He threw himself on the impaling stake, and his bowels gushed out. So both are true, and that's how you.
I've never heard that. That's great. That's why we try to have a conversation and learn.
So Bill, have you ever thought of writing a book of Christian apologetics as the first one written by
I would try to be fair. You
could probably sell a lot. You'd probably be doing pretty well financially. If you.
Well, I just try to look at the evidence and be fair about it. That's it.
Excellent.
Just like the people in our book club, they are very thoughtful, very, it's like Ken, the former missionary,
Yeah, it's one thing is there doesn't seem to be very many cheap shots. You seem to try to not do a straw man argument. That's what I'm noticing at the book club, that you try to really hear what the other person's saying. Can you repeat it back? If you can, you're understanding that worldview, and if you know how they think, it helps you be able to give a reasonable response and reasons for the hope that you have.
Right. Even if you don't agree, it's like, now we talked, I probably was, before we started, about, I go to the Parliament of the World's Religions, and I mostly like to hang around with the Wiccans. And in 1993, when I first met up with Wiccans for the first time, actually, and talked with Donald Frew, he was a PR for the Covenant of the Goddess. He spent a couple hours with us in our suite, and we talked about a whole range of issues, at the end of which he said, if I thought being a Christian is what you guys are, I would do it in a minute.
Right.
But I think you're an anomaly. I don't, because my experience with Christians is that they are liars and misrepresent what I believe.
Well, last Friday at our book club, we had 3 different people, after it was over, 3 atheists, 3 different ways at 3 different times, say something similar. If I had come across these arguments when I was still a Christian, it may have gone differently. Not that they're about to change or anything like that, but it was an interesting acknowledgement.
Well, and since you're talking, you seem to have an interesting representation of former Christians in the atheist segment. And that raises a question in my mind. A lot of people, when they convert from one view to another, sometimes it's like a feeling of release of a burden, but other times there can be a sense of loss. Even, you know, you might even have to go through a grieving period after you switch beliefs. You no longer had certain comforts that you used to have. Do any of the atheists who converted from Christianity to atheism ever talk about that? Is that ever?
Oh yeah, Ken's still married. His wife's a Christian.
So he sees it. He's lost something he had in common with his wife. There's a loss of, yeah.
He's not out for his own aggrandizement. You know, he's not like a glory seeker. He wrote a book, Why I Deconverted or whatever. But he's doesn't like the spotlight. And he goes to church once a month with her. So, you know, it's
okay. What about you personally, Bill? How would you?
Well, I know, being a good Calvinist, you believe in the tulip and the perseverance of the saints. So the question would be, was I really a Christian? And you know, I never really got to the next level of Christianity. But you look at someone like Dan Barker, and he was here at the Bible and Beer Consortium debating someone. And Justin Bass was a fantastic debate. But I asked him, because Dan Barker said, if I wasn't a Christian, nobody was. Because he went to Mexico to convert Catholics. And being a hardcore Christian like I was, I knew you got to be a pretty, you know, solid Christian to know that Catholics are not really Christians, that they need to be converted. So, you know, I asked him, Justin, I said, was he ever a Christian? He goes, I'd love to have him come to Christ, but I don't know. And then Dan got all out. He said, look, I was more of a Christian than you were. So,
well, as a Calvinist, I also would say that I don't separate the wheat from the tares, you know, and that it's possible for you or any person who formerly professed the faith, no longer professes the faith, to come back to the faith. I think it's not, I've seen it happen, you know, so I can't
it absolutely has happened. It happened with John Loftus, that was a big factor in my deconversion to the Debunking Christianity site. He had someone on his staff that went back to Christianity. He said, he never was a Christian in the first place. Kind of never was.
All right, guys, we are going to have to wrap it up here. We might have to revisit this again in the future. It's been fun. I think.
This has been great, guys,
and instructive. So,
thanks for coming.
Ron, can you walk us out of here?
Yes, let's give credit to where credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just in Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polygamous. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent on cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yo Leg Pulling. Our technical assistance comes from Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolutions director is Giovanna Pisami, director of privacy assurance, wiretapping. Original idea sourcing from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are totally responsible for its content, but you will never, ever, ever be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never in a court of law.
Hasn't happened even once.
All right, guys.
So thank you very much, Bill and James.
It's been good having you, and now you know you have been had.
Yeah.